Brother Leslie first visited Bhagavan in 1989. At that time, he was 21 years old. His mother, Veronica, was already an ardent devotee, but Leslie was very skeptical and was not sure what to think. Little did he know that Swami would soon win him over with his love. It was on his third trip in 1992 to Parthi when, out of deep desperation, he finally surrendered and his whole life was transformed by the miracle of Swami's divine love. This visit, originally, he was planning for staying only for 6 months, but it turned out that he would stay there for 5 years. And this 5 years of spiritual odyssey, of living and serving in the physical presence of Lord, made him who is he today. In Leslie's first interview in 1992, Swami asked him and his mom to run the Western canteen. They had no prior training or experience, but with Swami's grace, much hard work, and the service of many devotees they managed, cooked and baked, feeding many hundreds and sometimes thousands of devotees per meal. When Swami visited Bangalore, they ran the canteen there. Their vacation time off from the canteen was when they would follow Swami to Kodaikanal and other locations in India. All through the stay in India, Leslie was blessed with numerous interviews and Swami's close personal attention. He says he learned many deep, difficult, and liberating spiritual lessons in the process. In the last year of his stay, Swami asked Leslie to speak to the visiting devotees as a public relations officer to share Swami's messages, teachings, and his own experiences. After returning to USA in 1997, he has been working as an electrical and mechanical engineer in the medical and electric transportation fields. He lives in Ventura, California, where he continues the journey back to his source. Brothers and sisters, let's put our hand together for a warm welcome to Brother Leslie.
I don't want it to cover my face. A little lower. Okay. I offer my humble pranams at the lotus feet of my beloved, loving Lord, Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba. May you please speak through me, may love speak through me, and may this person called Leslie step out of the way so you may shine and bring love and blessings to everyone here. And everyone who's watching who's not here. Sai Ram, everyone. I want to first say that I am so grateful and thankful for all the people who have put together this incredible retreat. I feel so much love and so much pure dedication. There are people who we don't see, the people, the young adults who are driving people back and forth. People came here on Tuesday to set up all of what you see here. Everyone has been so kind to me, and I just want to have my gratitude and thankfulness. Thank you so much. when I came in this morning and I sat down just before bhajans, there was a small video being played of Swami giving darshan. And Swami comes out of the Purna Chandra, and when he first walks down on the ladies' side, there's a section where there are ladies who have been there a long time or who have served Swami, and my mother was sitting there, and I give, of course, Swami my greatest gratitude that I can be standing here today, but my other great gratitude is my mother. She was the one who brought me to Swami. And so I shed a few tears for seeing Swami and my mother in the same picture. What does Swami say about gratitude? For me, Swami says what gratitude is that to practice his teachings. But what does that mean? I would like to, I didn't know what I'm going to speak about. I never do. But I felt this morning something very special stirring inside of me. And I wish to talk about a beautiful romance story. It's a story that has to do with someone who was lost and who became found, and someone who started out in his head and now lives in his heart. And I wonder if you know who I'm talking about. Me. This small me, Swami took in his arms many, many births before. And I was sitting here yesterday thinking, and it came to me, the other gratitude that we have to have is to ourselves. And what I mean by that, we don't know the past births we've had, but all of the hard sadhana that you've done has brought you to this point. All the past births, all the grace, all the hard work has brought you here. And it's left you with an incredible responsibility too. That responsibility is to cherish and continue this journey. For me, my journey actually began when I was, how old was I? I was 10 years old, actually. I grew up with a very nice family, can't complain. Of course, I had karma with both parents, as we all do. My father, both parents were born in Hungary, in a communist country, and they escaped the country to find a better future. My father grew up in an atheist family, and my mother, she grew up in a Catholic family with 3 brother priests. So when I was being raised, my father, he went and tried and lived out all the things that he wanted to do in life. I didn't see him much. He was an engineer. And all I knew is that our houses got bigger, then we had a boat, then we moved on to a boat, and I was along with this journey and not knowing what's actually going on until one day my father disappeared. And he disappeared for 3 days, and eventually he called us. He disappeared with the boat, and he called my mother saying, "I'm okay, I'm coming back." And when he came back, he was an absolutely different person. I saw my father as my father, but he was no longer the same person. He was full of care and love. And most importantly, within a few months, my father asked me, "Do you want to go to Ojai with us?" And there's a beautiful school there, and you can attend that school. And I went with them, and it was J. Krishnamurti School in Ojai in California. So we visited. There were only 5 children in each class. So of course, I did not like school, the public school. I hated it. So I ended up saying, yes, I'd like to go. And my father, his path was a very jnana path. That means in his head a lot. We used to sit down a lot, and we would talk about Krishnamurti's teachings and so on. And for me, it was above my head. But I remember the day when I was 10 years old, we were talking, and suddenly I became aware of I am inside of me. I became aware that I'm here. From then on, I've always been aware of being aware, always aware of what's going on. And it was an odd thing, because before that, things were just happening. But suddenly something happened in me, and I thought everybody has this. And when I was 16 years old, I ended up doing carpentry in the summertime, working as a carpenter. My parents, when they raised me, they said, we'll give you your clothes, you go to school and everything, but if you want your own desires, you need to go and work and do your work and get your things. So I remember doing carpentry, and I had this incredible experience. I was working, I had first in carpentry, the first thing you do is you have to sweep up after the carpenters, because you have to start at the beginning, just like in your spiritual journey. You start out doing the hard work of cleaning up after. But then they began to teach me how to read the blueprints, how to cut the wood, how to measure everything, all the things that you would do as a carpenter. So one day, my boss said to me, see, we're actually building the high school for the school that I was going to. He said, here are the plans. This wall, you build it. So I went to get the plans. I knew how to read the plans. And as I looked at it, I heard a voice inside of me say, you don't need the plans. And so I didn't take the plans. I looked, but I remember what was on it. So I started to take out the tape measure and started to measure. And the voice inside of me said, you don't need the tape measure. And as this was going along, I began to feel this mind start to fade off. And I just what started happening was this body just started doing. And I felt a peace and a presence inside of me, and I just did it. And as I put the tape measure down, I took the wood and just cut the wood. I didn't measure. And as time went by, I didn't feel time go by. I felt just being in the present, absolutely in the present. There was no thoughts. There was nothing actually happening, but it was happening. Finally, I started to come back into having thoughts, and I suddenly saw that the whole wall with the window sills and everything was done. And I looked around, and I looked at it, and it was perfect. I looked around out into the fields and everything, and I just felt and saw that everything was perfect. And none of this had to be done with thinking. And that was one of the big lessons that I didn't realize at that time, was a journey that Swami was taking me from a life where we think all the time. There's a voice, there's like a tape recorder going in our head of noise constantly going and thinking of the past, thinking of the future. And we believe, because of how our society is, that we need thoughts in order to do. So I started going down my path in my life. Then as we do when we're young, our vasanas from previous births start to come up. And I wanted to have the things in life get a good job. I got married at a very young age. All my desires that I wanted at a very young age just started getting fulfilled. And as they got fulfilled, you know, you want more, you want more, you want more. But each time as you fulfill them, at least for me, I felt more and more empty. I felt a hole inside of me. I felt that presence that I felt when I built, when Swami built that wall, when Swami was fully inside of me, was the feeling that I was missing. And so I thought, well, the best way to get back to this is maybe I should start reading. But what happened that was really beautiful, my parents and I, we traveled across the United States, and while we were doing that, there was a program on television which was the story of Jesus of Nazareth. And every Sunday on the weekend when it was on, we would watch it. And as I watched this program, and this person who played this part, I started to feel this feeling of, oh my gosh, it is possible to live in this world with peace and love and compassion, with no desire. And I thought, oh my gosh, I was born 2,000 years too late. Why couldn't I have been born when Jesus was on earth? I would be sitting at his feet. I would drench in everything he has to say, but more importantly, I just want to be near him. And little did I know that there was someone just like that. But more than that, the Father is actually here. And it was my mother who actually found him first. And how did that happen? So I'm at the age where I'm pretty much leaving and almost left the home. And my father sat down with my mother and asked her, our son is pretty much raised, what do we do next? And my father said, we can travel the world, you can start a new career. What would you really want to do? And my mother said, I'm going to think this through seriously. And so she took about 3 days and came back and sat down seriously with my father and said, I know what I want. She did not know of Swami. She did not know of any of those things. What she said is, I want to find God, live with him, and serve him. Can you believe that? And what happened next? I think months ago or a year before that, someone had given my mother a book that she never really looked at, she never opened, and ended up on our bookshelf. And she was cleaning the bookshelves a few days after saying this, and pulls out this book and starts cleaning it. And when she looks at it, who's on the front cover of this book? It's Swami. And what happens? She starts to cry uncontrollably and says, this is him. This is God. She recognized immediately. She sat down and read the whole book without stopping from cover to back. And everything she read in there, she said, this is truth, this is truth, this is truth. And I have to go see him. So she ended up finding a center, joining a center, and myself, as I'm a teenager or an older person, I'm thinking, what is she doing? And she's going to this weird people who sing and do bhajans, and they worship a man who's got this funny hair and everything. I was a big doubter. But my mother started to go visit Swami, and I noticed that every time she went and came back, there was a glow about her. And not only that, But the things of life that we go through seem to just go off of her like on a duck, the water, it just comes off. Myself, I'm going about my worldly life thinking I know where I'm going. I had a very big spiritual ego. I took those experiences that I had, the wisdom that was naturally coming out of me, which came from previous births, I took it as if that's me, the ego me. So I had this big spiritual ego, and I'm telling my mother, you don't need to go see a guru. All the truth is within you. And that was my ego speaking. And so what did Swami do? He made my life, or I made my life, harder and harder, until one day I said with my wife at the time, let's go see Swami. So my mother and three of us, we went to India. I had a huge culture shock. It was very strange for me. I ended up at darshan there with this huge spiritual ego on my shoulder, and I said, Swami is going to come out, and when he sees me, he's immediately going to come to me and take us for an interview. And guess what happened? I got way in the back. Swami came out, never looked my direction, and this went on for 3 days. And finally, I said to myself, I don't need this. Swami's not a real master. I'm going to go up to the Himalayas where the real masters are with the beard and sitting like that, right? That's where the real masters are. How incredibly lost, but Swami with his love was guiding and allowing me to go off the road until finally, this was now a year, well, I ended up we got on a train to go up to the Himalayas, and on that third day we were there, I got so sick. I got what they call the Delhi belly. I got so sick that I decided I'm going back to the States. I had enough of this. But Swami pulled me back. About a year and a half later, I came back just with my mother and my father. And I ended up staying for 3 months. And I began to read Swami's books, Swami's literature, and started to soak up what actually Swami's teachings were. I still didn't know who Swami is. I didn't fully trust him. Because I didn't know, is he the Antichrist? But wait a minute, no, he's not. So after reading Swami's literature, having a lot of interesting experiences, my father, he was going down meditation and the path of jnana, and I thought I should go that way because I looked up to my father as if he's my teacher as well. And I looked at my mother as this strange person who's crying when she sees Swami, who loves Swami so much, and I thought, that's really odd, that's not the way to go. But I ended up going back to the States, thinking I have now Swami's teachings and my life will get better. And let me just tell you, it got worse. I went back, I couldn't get a job, my marriage fell apart, we separated, and I ended up living in a friend's garage because I had practically no money. And one night I'm sitting there, it's cold in the garage, and I had a picture of Swami and Jesus, and I didn't know I knew that Jesus is my brother. I felt that relationship, but I still didn't know how to put Swami in it. So I fell on my knees and I said, one of you, just one of you, please help me. And so I couldn't go to bed, and I walked over to my father's house, which was across the fields where I was living in Ojai. In the middle of the night, I knock on his door, and he comes, what is it? And I said, I need to talk to you. I need someone to talk to. I said, I don't know what to do. I can't get a job. I practically have no money. I don't know who I am. I feel a hole inside of me. what should I do? And he says, of all the things, he always doubted Swami. He never believed that Swami was God. But what he just said to me was this. He said, why don't you go to India, be with Swami, stay there for 6 months, and before that, send your resumes out, and maybe by the time you come back, you'll have a job. And I said, but I have no money. And here's another strange thing coming from his mouth. He says, don't make an excuse. And I said, what? He said, don't make an excuse. You need to go and check. I said, okay. So next morning I wake up and I go to the bank early in the morning, first in the morning, to see how much money I have in the bank. And so I asked the teller, can you please write down how much I have? She writes it down, shows it to me, and I hand it back to her and say, you have the wrong account. And she says, she checks, no, this is what's in your account. You know how much money was in the account? Enough to buy a ticket and stay in India for 6 months. Swami was taking care of everything. This doubting Thomas was being pulled back to Swami, pulled back to the Lord. And so at the time, I was very much so desperate to find an answer. I had stacks of books like this, mythology, philosophy, Bible, this teacher, that teacher, and I packed up all those with me and I traveled to India. And my mother was very happy that I came, that I'm going to stay so long. And I go to darshan and stuff, but I can't wait to read and everything. And so I think it's the third day, I'm sitting and reading, and my mother, as I'm sitting down, pulls the book down and looks at my eyes and she says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm reading. And she says, why did you come here? And it suddenly hit me. I came here because I needed help. I need help, and I came to see Swami. I put the books down, and my mother says, that's right. So suddenly born inside of me was this feeling that I really want to talk with Swami. I really need Swami's help. So how do I get in an interview? My mother said the best way usually is to join a group because Swami can call people in a group. So how am I going to get in a group? So I went to darshan that morning, sat down in the queues, in the lines where people line up to go inside for darshan. And what do I hear? I hear people speaking English next to me. And not just any kind of English, very familiar English. And I turned over and I said, where are you guys from? And they said, we're from California. That's where I'm from. And I said, can I join your group? And he says, well, you can come tomorrow. We're getting together and we'll talk about it. So I went the next day. And remember, I thought that devotees are cuckoo people. They do this funny bhajan kind of stuff. You know, the real thing is where you're reading and philosophy and all that stuff. And but I sat down with him and he said, look, you can join our group, but we are a group. We know that Swami calls groups in who have unity, who get together and do bhajans, we read, we do study circles, and we do seva. If you agree to do that, you can join our group. I said, sure. So for the next few days, I did this. And I suddenly saw that these are beautiful, normal people. They have normal jobs. They're not cuckoo. And slowly, Swami was breaking down this person. But at the same time, as these days were going by, I felt inside of myself a clock counting down to 0. I felt as if an existential emptiness coming to a point where there's not going to be any more of me. I felt as if there is a point where this is going to end. And it's not suicide, I'm talking about that. So what happens? One day we get first row, and our group leader says to us, when Swami comes, we're all going to ask Swami for an interview. And so I'm going, oh my gosh, we're going to talk to Swami? I never thought about that. So what happens? Swami comes, and there's 5 of us. The group leader, he freezes, he's just like this. The next person freezes, he's just like that. And finally, Swami's coming and says, oh my, I'm going to have to talk to Swami. So Swami comes, and he stops in front of me, and I look up, and I said, Swami, interview. And he looks down. And what looks down at me isn't a 5-foot, 3-inch man with an afro. What looked down at me was the whole universe and beyond. What came and looked down at me were these eyes that were infinite. They looked through me to the depth of me. And I felt this warmth, this feeling that I have been searching for so long. And what does Swami say? Where did you come from? I mean, where did you come from? And I go, California. Huh? I said, Ojai. And he goes, Ojai. I will see, I will see. And as he walks off, as he takes letters, I no longer see a human being walking. I see beauty. I see divinity. And I'm almost crying. And then this mind comes back and says, why are you feeling this way? It's just a man who spoke to you. And I go, shh, get away. I'm feeling happy for the first time. And what happened then is, I want more of this. So the next 3 times that we had the same situation happen, where we were all lined up in front row, Swami did the same thing. Everybody froze, and it was my turn to ask Swami for an interview. And I seen Swami taking 50 people into the interview room, and this one time Swami's coming, and I said, Swami, interview, and Swami turns and down to me, and he says, looks on the veranda, he's only taken 3 people, he says, too many people, the room is too small. I will see, I will see. And I'm getting desperate, because inside myself I am dying. I don't feel that I can keep going on living as who I am. So finally, on the most important day of my life, on March 4th, 1992, I woke up. And I woke up absolutely empty. I couldn't picture anything beyond darshan. There was an absolute emptiness beyond that. My mind couldn't go past that. I walked like a zombie to darshan. I sat down with my group, and we went inside. We got second row across from directly where Swami comes across from the ladies' side. And mind you, I had no idea who Swami is. I didn't know who I am. And so I saw my friends, new friends, writing something down on pieces of paper. And I said, give me a piece of paper. And I wrote this: Dear Lord, I don't know who you are, I don't know what you are, but I give my body, my mind, and my heart to you. And what happened? Swami came, and when he came out, as he came out from there, he immediately looked over to where I'm at, and I'm holding my letter. And as he was going around taking letters, every so often he'd look and make sure I'm still sitting there. And I'm holding my letter, and he's coming and coming, and finally he comes over to where we are, and I get on my knees, and I show him the letter, and Swami takes the letter gently, and I said, "Swami, interview, please." This is a fourth time. And what does Swami say? "I will see, I will see." And he starts to walk away. And that's not possible. That's not possible. As I said, I couldn't see a moment past darshan. There's no life for me past this darshan. And what comes from me from the bottom of the pit of my soul? Please. And Swami stops and he turns around and with Krishna smile says, "Go." I'm on the veranda like this. I forgot that I'm in a group. I had run up there like so fast because I just had this feeling like the solution is about to be revealed. So finally the rest of my group shows up. My mother, she had gotten up from the ladies' side. All the group came up and there are people sobbing next to me out of happiness. The ladies too are crying and I wasn't sobbing. And I'm saying there must be something wrong with me. And so Swami comes on the veranda and he spends time with some of the VIPs and finally he ushers people into the interview room. And then I am the gentleman and I wait for everybody to go in and I'm last. And that's the last time I did that. So Swami ushers me to go in and the place is packed. There's only 25 of us, but it's full. And the only place to go is way in the back. And so I go up into the back, sit down, and the lights aren't on yet. But when Swami comes in, he turns the light on and turns the fan on. But for me, it wasn't, again, a man who walked in. What came in that room, no words can say. The word God and Lord are nothing compared to what I was experiencing. I experienced home. I experienced the end of the road. And at the same time, I felt, I've known this. I've known this since the beginning. And what I was feeling was I was looking at me, not the little me. And at the same time, I was seeing a me that was so infinite with love. And there was nothing more to need, nothing more to search for. Yet it was in this body, in this Sai body. And as the interview went on, I started to feel on my face pain. And I was like, why is my face hurting? And I suddenly realized I was smiling so strong that my muscles in my face were hurting. And Swami sat down and he began to ask people a question. And the most important question, and he asked this just about every time to people in interviews. He turns to an Indian gentleman with his son, and Swami asks him, "Sir, what do you want?" And the man says, "Swami, my son, he needs a wife. Could you please help find him a wife? Could you do that, Swami?" And Swami says, yes, I will see you later. And what I felt was, is that what you came to ask me for? But Swami, of course, he's the wish-fulfilling tree, he says. He will grant you our wishes until you actually ask for what he's come to give. And mind you, again, I didn't know who this is who I'm walking into the room with. I had, just 20 minutes ago, I had so many doubts. Is he a guru? Is he who knows what? he turns to another young man and asks a man, "What do you want?" And he says, "I want to know more about God." And so Swami started speaking about the 5 different knowledges of God. I don't remember what he said, because I know that looking for knowledge, looking in the books, looking in your head, looking in your mind, what did that get me? What was in front of me was there, was the answer, and my mind was not there. Something else had taken over, a feeling that I felt for before when I was building that wall, but 1,000,000 times more than that. And so that beautiful form turned, and after he said this to the man of the 5 different knowledges of God, Swami still, his face looked like he wasn't satisfied. "Is that what you want?" And suddenly he turned and looked way in the back and said, "Hey boy, what do you want?" And I was amazed, because I'm watching as if I'm watching from outside what Leslie is doing. And what comes out of this mouth would never have come out of this mouth just 10 minutes before. What comes out of my mouth is, "All I want is you." And Swami jumps up out of the chair and says, good boy, and come here. And I start to walk. I can barely walk through the crowd. And Swami waves his hand big like this. And in the middle of the air, this ring appears, and Swami grabs it out of the air. And it's a silver ring with Shirdi Baba on it. And Swami is going to hand it to me to put it on my finger. And what do? I go, "I don't want that." And you say, "What? Why wouldn't you take something?" What that ring represented to me is all the things, physical things that I got in my life. The cars, the wife, the job, creation. Do I want creation? No, I want the Creator. And this wasn't a thought in my mind, it was my heart acting. And so Swami says, no, I made it for you. And I'm going, "I don't want that. I want you, Swami." And Swami goes, "Oh," and then he puts it in my pocket. He goes back and he pulls me with him and he sits me down right in front of him. And he puts his feet on my lap. And he looks down at me and says, how do you get to God?" I don't know how to answer that. I'm literally going like this to Swami. And he says something so simple. Swami's teachings aren't huge, long words. I used to scoff at the fact you walk in the not scoff, but kind of look down at this thing that you see, these very simple teachings, love all, serve all. That can't be the answer, these little things. But Swami's teachings are the most powerful. And he says, all you have to do is just pick one of them. Pick one of them and just do that one with dedication. Don't jump here and there. And what does he tell me? Follow the 3 Ps. Patience, perseverance, and purity. Patience, perseverance, purity. Oh, that sounds easy, does it? No. And you can even just pick one of those. And if you practice just one of those, it will bring, Swami says, the other 2. So Swami, again, every time he starts talking to some other people, he would turn to me and say, "What do you want?" And I kept saying, "You, Swami." And finally, he takes us to the private interview room, again, sits me down in front of him, puts his feet on my lap. I can't go anywhere. And he takes the ring out of my pocket, and he blows on it in front of my face like this 3 times. And the 3rd breath, I wasn't blinking or anything, that silver ring became a golden brooch. And Swami looks behind me and sees there was an Italian lady, there was Italian people behind me, and says, "Madam, this is for you." And I can hear her going, "Oh, thank you, Swami, thank you, Swami." Swami gives it, I think even puts it on her sari, and Swami's robe is all over me, and and Swami sits down and asks me one more time, "What do you want?" And I said, "You, Swami." And Swami goes, "Take me." And what do I do? And what do I do? I fall into his lap, and I'm hugging Swami like this, out of pure innocence, out of not in my mind. And Swami goes, "No, no, 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 no." And I learn a huge lesson here, that it's not the form, but it is the form. What coming through that form, how can I love Swami? I'm loving Swami that's coming through that form, but I can't take this with me physically. How important the form is for us, because only through that we have this connection. So the next thing that happens is we leave the interview, the private interview room, and Swami, as everyone's sitting down, Swami begins to wave his hand again, like this, and suddenly there's a golden bracelet in his hand. And he takes the bracelet and grabs my arm, and even I can't take my arm away because I can't go, "I don't want it," but he grabs it and he puts it on. He doesn't let go, and he drags me into the private interview room nicely and closes the door. And what happens in there is so beautiful. Everything that happened in this first interview should have been enough, but because we have doubting minds, because we've come into this world going in this direction, Swami, this loving Lord, has the patience to, even after giving us everything, knows that we're still going to need more work, But I'm in the interview, I'm standing there, and Swami is pacing around. And he comes to me and he says, "This is not a trinket like those things." And so I knew that this had some important meaning to it. And that golden bracelet, after a week, it went from being pure gold, it turned to silver, then it turned black, and then it started to crumple, and finally it broke. And I knew that it had its purpose, and the whole time I had it on my arm was numb with like energy going through my arm. So I knew that this had a deep purpose. But more importantly, Swami was pacing the room because I felt as if, we think that it's taken us, "Oh my gosh, I wish I would have come to Swami when I was younger. I wish I would have come to Swami when he was here, when he was much younger." Swami was walking around because I felt Swami has been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time. Swami says, why did he create this universe? Why are we here? It's very simple. He says, I separated myself from myself so that I might love myself. What I was experiencing in that first interview room was pure love. It wasn't the mind. The mind is just something here that needs to be used occasionally as we're individuals here. But Swami says, what is the mind? It's just a bundle of thoughts. So Swami I feel he's ready to give me everything at once, but he's holding it back. And Swami starts to tell me about why my marriage wasn't working. He says, when you're up, she's down. When she's up, you're down. Up and down, up and down. And he also started reenacting something that happened when I was a teenager and I was going to do a bad thing that someone was teaching me to do. He reenacted the whole thing. And the most important thing that happened then, and let me please tell you, what I'm speaking here, this is not about me. I'm not a teacher. Humility is the most important thing. What I'm sharing with you is your journey as well. It's not me. Why have we come here on this earth? Just as much as I have, when I first saw that show of Jesus, I knew that it's possible to have a divine life. And we think that especially many religions teach us that we're sinners or we're bad or we have all this guilt and everything. That's all mental. We're not that. Swami came here to show us by his example that you can live a life, a divine life. Yes, he's the Lord to us now because we feel ourselves separate, but that's not how he wants us to stay. He came here to tell us for years, through discourses after discourses, how long will you keep separating yourself from me? Think greater, believe greater, have faith greater. You are born to be divine. First become human. When you become fully human, you will become divine. And our Lord showed us how. How by example. Everything he did was an example for us. Prior to this interview, when I was there for the first 3 months, I had written a letter to Swami. Because my parents said, you should write a letter to Swami asking what you want. And what did I write down in this letter? I wrote, Lord, or I said, Swami, I didn't know he's the Lord at the time. I said, Swami, all I want is to live a divine, magical, mystical life. Remember this. This was a year or a year and a half before. Now I'm in this interview, and after Swami doing all of this, giving me all this love, says, go, let's go out. So I'm turning away from Swami, walking out, and Swami says to me, I will give you liberation. I will give you a peaceful life, a divine peaceful life. And as I'm turned back to him, as he's saying this, it wasn't this small Lord, even though he was this big to me. And I almost melted right then. And he took me by the shoulders because I was almost falling apart from all of this love that I couldn't handle. And he took me and he sat me down right inside the door there. And as I started to come to, he turned to my mother and said, you run canteen and son helps. And my mother said, what? You run canteen and son helps. And she asked, when, Swami? And he said, tomorrow. And this was my big lesson in the starting, that only we think we can't do something. Only here we think, because we think with our minds that, well, we need to put together a committee, we need to do a bunch of planning, we need to do all of this, and then maybe in about a few weeks we can open a canteen, right? But Swami said, open canteen tomorrow. As soon as we left the interview room, as we're walking back home, people started coming to us and saying, we heard that you're going to be opening the canteen. Where did that come from? We're going to come and help. And by that evening, all the people were there. We were cleaning the canteen, getting it ready. And by next morning, we had prepared porridge and toast. That was the very first meal that we served with Swami's grace. And the next 5 years, So how was it? For my mother, it was a full 4.5 to 5 years of working in the canteen. For me, it was 3.5 years, and then I became a public relations officer. But the first 6 months was Swami pouring love, 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 love. It was like absolute romance. I was a gopika. I went from being this person in the head, looking down at devotion, to being absolutely floored that I had to see Swami every day. And it wasn't because, it was all because every time I was in his presence, I felt who I really am. So as time went by, I began to ask myself, I started to have thoughts in my head, how's the best way to get to God? Because as I started to do the service, which I never really did that much before, those thoughts of me started to go away. I started to realize I wasn't serving somebody else. I was serving Swami and everybody. And the more I gave, the more inside I became happy. And I will tell you, it wasn't that easy because we worked from 4:30 in the morning to 10 o'clock every single day for these how many years? So what I really wanted to talk to you about, and I have 15 minutes? My gosh, it's hard to put 5 years into 1 hour and 15 minutes. What I really wanted to, what Swami is really trying to come from all of this is my journey has been a journey from me to we. It's been a journey from myself back to we. We're born in this world and taught in this world that feeling like we're little islands here, thinking everything has to be about us. What is my job, my thing, my thing? But Swami turned this all around, and it became, this body is a temple to shine out to everybody in whatever I do. And I asked Swami inside, what is the best way to get back to always being with you, not separate from you? How? And let me tell this story because I have time. So after 3 years of working with Swami and having all the attention, or the first 6 months having a lot of attention, Swami in one of my interviews at the end said, "You worry if Swami doesn't talk to you or look at you. Don't worry if Swami doesn't look at you and talk to you." And I thought, no problem. The moment after that darshan, for the next almost three years, Swami stopped looking at me and stopped talking to me. And at the beginning, it was very, very difficult. But what that whole process was Swami taking me through this part that, Swami can shower lots of love with you. You can feel him really close, and at times you feel that you're far away from him. But what he also did was, after 3 years working there, he one day said, "You don't need to, no more working in the canteen." He sent someone to say, "No more working in the canteen." So I stopped working in the canteen, and now this old vasanas started coming back. I thought, wow, now I can read again. This whole thing came back again, and I thought, I can read the Vedas, I can read the different Shankaracharya and all those things. So I started to read these because I yearned for this liberation, for this idea of going back to God. And so I started doing this, and I didn't know how to communicate with Swami. I didn't have a one-to-one communication, so I took this little coin, And I started flipping this coin to ask Swami questions. And Swami now took me through 6 months of an interesting road. Every time I flipped the coin and asked the question to Swami, no matter how many times I flipped it, he would always give the same answer. I was testing him. Is it yes, 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 yes? So, oh wow, I got a communication through Swami. But as I was doing this meditations and doing this tapas and everything, I started to feel the mind going. I started to feel this sense of divinity inside of me, and I started to feel that all of this is Maya. And for 6 months, this grew and grew and grew until, as this was happening, I didn't realize that I was losing something. What I had actually started losing is love inside of me. I ended up going to darshan. Why should I have to go to darshan? If I'm God, I don't need to go to darshan. Can you believe this was happening inside this head? And it got to a point where I had this communication had taken me through this mental thing that on March 4th, which is my anniversary of my first interview, I will become self-realized. So that day comes, I'm absolutely at peace inside myself. There's barely any thoughts going, but I didn't realize that there was no love in me, and that all of this, what was happening, was just another game of the ego. And I flipped this coin, and then I was there that morning, and nothing happened, no liberation. Next morning, next in the afternoon, Swami comes, and as I remember, I told you I wasn't feeling any love. Swami looks at me, and he looks with absolutely no love. No, it's like a reflection of what's inside of me, and he says, "Go." So I jump up. I get up and I start walking to go to the veranda, and my mother wasn't there because she's working in the canteen. I'm not. And I sit down, and Swami comes in, and we go inside, and he's sweet to everybody. He's asking people things, very sweet. And I'm not feeling anything. I'm just feeling like, my doubts start coming in my head. Why did I get called for an interview? If I'm God, I don't need an interview. Can you believe this going on inside of me? And Swami finally finishes those interviews, and he takes me for a private interview. And as we're going in, he asks me, "Who are you?" And I said, "I am God, and you are Maya." And Swami's face goes, he was about to sit down, and he says, "No, no, 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 no. I'm God, and you are my son." And I said, "No, Swami, I'm God and you're Maya." Swami doesn't want to have this. And the beautiful thing about this is all his play. This last 6 months is all his play to root out this thing of ego. And he finally asked me, "Where is God?" Now, in my philosophy, in my belief system that I created in these last 6 months, I say he's everywhere. Well, it matches Swami's teachings. So he says, "Very good." And as we're sitting down, you know what he does? You see, we think that when Swami touches you or does something, that's all just some physical thing. There is incredible something happening, because what he does, just like to a child, he goes like this. And when he does this, I start to feel the cracks. I almost feel them in my mind, that this last 6 months, not just 6 months, but probably past lives of this thing that we need to have a mind, that we need to have a belief, that we need to have all these constructs, just starts to crumble, crack. And my mind, my ego desperately tries to say, "No, no, 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 I'm God, Swami's Maya," that's going on inside of me. But Swami is going to hit me again, and he says, "Where's your mother?" And I said, "She's in the canteen." And he says, "Why aren't you in the canteen?" And I was wondering, before, because people would come to me, why don't you help your mother? My mother works so hard there. But no, I wouldn't go and ask Swami because I wanted to read. I wanted to become spiritual. I wanted to get liberation, right? And so all of this starts to happen. All of this is falling apart, and I feel like I've been in a boxing match. And Swami says, go. So I leave this interview feeling like I didn't have an interview. And not only that, but Swami gives vibhuti packets and everything, and my mother says, when I get back to our apartment, says to me, where were you? And I said, I had an interview. And she says, no. And so I prove it. I said, look, I've got vibhuti packets. And she says, what happened? What did Swami do? And she's full of love, and I'm not. And so what I do, this desperate ego trying to hold on to its beliefs, tells the whole story of the last 6 months that I did in my own mind. And at the end of it, my mother almost believed me. She's looking down, maybe I am Maya, maybe you are only God. Oh my gosh. How powerful our minds are, how powerful we can even convince somebody else who loves Swami. And then finally she brings her head up and says, no, I don't believe you. And I said, why? And she says, because there's no love in you. And that was the last straw. My mind just crumbled. And I went for a walk and walked around the ashram many times until the sevadals told me it's time to go up. And I went up to, my mother's already sleeping, and what do? I fall at the altar, and I said, Swami, I'm so sorry. I felt absolutely empty. I didn't believe in anything anymore. I had become absolutely empty. And all I asked for in front of the altar was, Swami, I will never read again. I will never need to search again. I will never go down this route again. Even if you kick me out of the ashram, never look at me, never speak to me. Please give me back one thing. Give me back my love for you. Next morning I go to darshan, and I'm sitting there, remember before, feeling no love, and I'm crying there, feeling that I've lost the most important thing, and that is love. But guess what? That morning, the sun comes up, and when Swami comes out, my favorite darshan music is playing, and the moment I see him, all of this love comes back. And this was one of the biggest lessons in for me, was that love is what's important. When Swami sent me back to come back here to the States, so I said to Swami, when Swami said for me to come back, I said, Swami, all I want is you. All I want is to get to the end of the road and liberation, but not this mental thing that I had, but that true coming back to him. And Swami says, yes, I will give, but how can I give if the water in the pot is dirty? What does that mean? That means that all of us are born with various karmas and vasanas and things that we need to finish. But I came back here with something so important, so much transformation happened inside of me. And most importantly, what came back was this little, that I that used to run the life that's inside this body is not the charioteer anymore. The charioteer is Swami. And even though life may go up and down, and things may be difficult and so on, it's only in the mind. It's all up to him. I had a dream once when I was how much time do I have? One of the most important dreams that I ever had that's imprinted in my heart, I think is a message for us all. In the dream, I am suddenly in Ojai, where I was before. It's nighttime, and I'm with the students, and they're waiting for Swami to arrive. And I'm waiting too, and Swami arrives, and he gets out of the car, and there's an auditorium, and they all rush into the auditorium with Swami, and I want to get in too, but I'm thinking, I'm not a student, I can't get in. So I think, how do I get in? Oh, I'll go in the back. So I go into the back, I go to the back of the auditorium, and there is a door, but next to that door is this big man who's guarding the door. And I go up to him and can I get in? And he looks around to make sure no one's watching, and he just opens the door like this, and he says, go. So I go inside, and as I go inside, I'm hearing this strange music, and I recognize it. It's disco music, 70s disco music. And I come down and I see lights flashing, and I'm ending in this basement, and in the basement, I see Swami students. And they're holding big bowls of prasad with laddu. And I go over to one of them and I said, may I have one? And he goes, it's mine. And I go, okay. And so I begin I see that there's a spinning disco ball in the center, and I see there's dancing going on in the middle. So I start to walk that way, and I start to peer through and finally the boys open up. And who's dancing in the middle there? It's Swami. He's dancing, the disco dance like this. But it's odd to me. And he's wearing a very light-colored yellow robe. But Swami's dancing like this. And he grabs me. And he wants me to dance with him. But I realize in this dream, this is not the Swami that I want. This is Maya Swami. This is the dance of Maya. It's all nice and fun. We can have the laddus, we can have all the gifts that Swami gives, but is that really what we want? And so I pushed him away, and I ran through the students, and I ended up breaking through there, and I'm in now a restaurant like a Denny's or Caro's, I don't know if you know those, but there are these booths. And at the end of the row, where the booths, at the end is Swami in a burgundy robe. And this is now divinity. And I walk up and I can't stand anymore, and I fall on my knees. And I look up, and he looks down at me, and he reaches down with his hand. And I take his hand, and he holds on it tight. And he starts to walk back the direction I came. And as we're walking, and he starts to talk to people in the booths, but any time my hand slips a little bit, Swami holds on even tighter and stops everything he's doing and makes sure he's holding on. You know what this means. He's the one who's guiding and pulling and taking us, never letting us go. Finally, we get back to where the students are, and the students are now, they take a double take. Wait a minute, there's two Swamis. There's the dancing one and this one. But they also say, wow, they want to jump on the divine Swami. And so they're about to jump on him, and I'm trying to keep them off, and Swami turns to me, no. You know why he did that? We should never interfere with other people's devotion, their path. Swami was showing me, don't. Everyone has their own path. So now we're walking, and it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter until finally there's so many people, we're no longer able to walk through them. We're walking on the shoulders of the people. And I noticed in the distance are two fences, almost like rails, similar to like what Jonathan was talking about, these rails, holding this crowd together. And it's getting narrower and narrower and narrower until finally there's only enough space for Swami and me to go. And he's always been holding on my hand. But now as I look up, I can't see Swami anymore, but he's still holding my hand. His hand is going to infinity. And these two rails are all, as Jonathan was saying, are all coming into that infinity in the front. And finally, I start to feel the speed of time going by. And finally, Swami wouldn't show me how much time went by, but suddenly, I'm at the end. And what's the end? There's a small little fence, beautiful meadow in front of me, and I look down, I'm no longer there. And I float through, the fence opens up, and I float behind a little cottage, and there, sitting on a little bench, is Swami. But I no longer see Swami. I no longer am me anymore. I'm looking at myself. And what happens then? After that, I'm bliss, infinite bliss fills me. This individuality that I think I am fades. And at the last moment, just before all of it fades, I wake up. This dream, this vision that Swami gave me is for all of you. It's for all of you. Don't go after the Maya. Don't go after the dancing Maya. Swami says, yes, be in the world. Jesus said, be in the world, but don't become of it. Don't believe the mind. You don't need it. It will fade away. Be full of love. And love will hold your hand and take you to the end, to when you will become Sai. Sai Ram.
Brother Leslie, the muscles on my face have started to, pain a little bit too, because I was smiling all through your wonderful talk. Thank you for taking us through your journey to God, and that too with a great sense of humor, and lovely dancing too, by the way. And we can all, you are laughing about it, and we can all laugh with you. But I'm sure it must have been really, really difficult for you. And what I took away from this is, of course, it's tough. This path is tough, but with the right amount of determination, perseverance, and hard work, the greatest reward of all is waiting in the end of it. That's Swami himself. Thank you for inspiring us and sharing your wonderful spiritual experiences and stories so that we can all follow your example. Thank you. I have a few announcements before we go to the next program. Someone has lost a gold ring. If anybody finds it, please report it to the service desk. If you need rides or can provide a ride, again, please contact the service desk. We have two devotees who are looking for rides to near Edison in New Jersey. If you are able to offer a ride, kindly contact service desk. Car key number 30, if this is your key, please contact Brother Banu at the service desk. SSC presentations start at 10:30 here in the devotion hall. And there are some energy bars available right outside. So please feel free to grab one if you would like. If interested, we have USB drives from Patti filled with bhajans, Vedam, and discourses. They are available at the service desk and for a nominal fee. Anyone interested, please take a look with something nice to listen on your way home. Before you leave, please drop off your badges, name badges at the service desk. Please make sure you clean up your cabins and trash, put the trash out before you leave. We need a lot of hands to clean up the campsite and take down all the signs and various other things. So if you are able to stay back and clean up, help clean up, please do so. To-go lunch is available in the dining hall. Please pick up before you leave. Take a recycled bag home. All the paper and plastic supplies used in the kitchen and dining hall are being recycled. We do not have recycling facilities here at the camp or anywhere close by. So it will be a great saver if you can help us by taking one bag home and recycle along with other recycling items from your home. Thank you all once again. Jai Sai Ram. In 5 minutes, we will be starting our SSC program.